Ethan Roots there crashing forward.
It's Tommy Freeman who makes it! They're going to tackle me, but they're going to hold the ball, they're going to try and rip the ball off me. I'm going to have to get angry.
There's a thing called ICU psychosis. Sometimes the drugs they give you to keep you alive was a roll of dice thing, you know. It takes you to all sorts of places. I would have sworn that the experiences I went through, and it seemed like years, but those experiences I went through, I'd have sworn they were real. And I was resuscitated a few times. I was just a lucky man. You don't know what you've got until it might not be there anymore. You're listening to the England Rugby Podcast O2 Inside Line. I'm Andrew Strawbridge. I'm currently coaching an English rugby team. My role is a little bit vague and it crosses a lot of the portfolios. So I'm here to help the coaches with their coaching, and I'm here to help the players develop the technical parts of their game. I'd say it's a sticky bick, know-all role. What makes a good know-all is having made a lot of mistakes, being motivated to help others avoid the pitfalls so that their learning process is a bit quicker than mine was. I grew up in a town called Hamilton, which is in the central North Island of New Zealand. It was a good place for families, close to a lot of places, but pretty straight. When I was at school, I was a line tower. I did everything that I should do, and I think I worked reasonably well. And then I think by the time I got to 14 or 15, I got a little bit cynical about the education system, and I sort of recognised it for what it was, which is really just a way of conforming, much to the interest of my father. You know, I became a little less driven academically. My first exposure to rugby was the same as most New Zealanders, you know, watch the national team. Wonderful memories of getting up at 3, 4 in the morning with my dad to watch the All Blacks play Wales or England or Scotland on the television, and getting excited about watching them in the afternoons in New Zealand. My family's background, particularly on my mother's side, was all about football. I played a year when I was about 12, and then I didn't play again until I was about 17 rugby. And I only played because I went to school with a guy called Warren Gatland. I remember him being in the first 15, and I was the goalkeeper for the football team at school, and he talked me into giving up my morning, because I played early afternoon, giving up my morning to go and play for the second 15 at rugby. When I was about 16 or 17, he's to blame for my involvement in the game and the reason I struggled to get up in the mornings with a broken body. Finding rugby was exciting. You know, it was our national game. It was exciting. I probably should have played any other sport. I was a skinny Pakeha boy, very small, and got knocked around a lot. I just loved doing things. I loved sport, whether it was cricket or rugby or football or anything. When I first started playing for Waikato, I'd only played rugby for a year. I knew very little about men and about brutality and about aggression. I got picked after a handful of club games because our team didn't have a goal kicker, and I'd played soccer, so I got a few kicks over, so I got picked to play for Waikato. Now, I remember my first game. I found out about that in the paper. No one rang me. His name was put in the paper. And then the very first game I played, I remember the changing room. The game back then was all about intimidation. And I sat in the changing room, and one of the midfield backs was wandering around the room, smashing the ball against his chest, bumping into people. And then he bumped into one of the loose forwards, and the loose forward picked him up by the throat and shoved him against the wall. I just about wet myself. I snuck off to the toilet and locked the door and sat there rocking, wondering what the heck I was in for. And I came out when the ref blew his whistle. That's when I came out of the change room, went out and played my first game for Waikato. It takes experience to get context. You don't know what you're stepping into, and that's a good thing a lot of the time, because you're not held back by expectation or knowledge of history and what you're representing and what you're doing. So when I first went out and played, I played with some pretty tough men. They made me feel welcome. They looked after me. I played one game and got dropped. That was an interesting learning moment, because I realised, actually, I quite enjoyed that. I think I'd like to do that again. So I worked reasonably hard to get another opportunity, and that happened about 6 months later. A couple of years later, I hurt myself and had a knee reconstruction. The surgeon at the time told me I wouldn't play sport again. I might have been 22, 23, something like that. And that's when I thought, well, actually, no. I'll do this again. So those setbacks helped me focus on what I enjoyed and what I wanted to do. And what I discovered was that I could probably be better, physically better than I was in the first place. So it was helpful discovering that independence, that ability to find answers within myself. When I was younger, I was unclear about what I wanted to do. Both my parents were teachers, and I vowed and declared I'd never end up teaching. I'd never do it. So I ended up teaching. I have taught geography, social studies, English, maths, drama, woodwork. I've been a deputy principal, been a special needs coordinator. What I realise now is that coaches is a word we use to make ourselves feel grand, but really we're just teachers. So I'm just a teacher. It's just a slightly different subject matter. I got introduced to the concept of coaching as a teacher. For several years, my mate and I coached the first 15, then went off at half time on a Saturday. We'd go off and play our own games for our club teams or for Waikato. And I started to realise there was a very little difference between what I was trying to do in the classroom with students and what I was doing on the pitch with the players. Helping people with behavioural change, that concept of sowing seeds for a desire to get better or grow, they were the same. I talk a lot to young coaches about being mindful of people's backgrounds. I remember the very first week I taught, you had to ring home if a student had been late to school. I might have been 23. Got someone on the phone who just was full of curse words and negative attitudes about this kid. You know, if they ever show their face around here, I don't want to see them, blah, blah, blah. Well, you just assume as you go through your life that everyone's had the same background as you. I just assumed everyone enjoyed the love of their parents or a reasonably secure home life. And I was so incredibly naive. And that one phone call changed everything for me. When I first finished playing, and I'd been coaching at school, I didn't always find it the most nourishing environment, rugby. And so I'd go and look at other things and do other things and then come back for a little while and go and do other things and come back for a little while. I carried on teaching. I went to a different school, came and played rugby overseas several times, player coach roles overseas that I quite enjoyed because I never had a lot of money. I was a school teacher. School teachers don't have a lot of money. Travelling exposed me to the different ways people can think about things, different attitudes to different aspects of life. But I sort of went off rugby for a while, you know, and I had several years where I didn't do a lot of coaching and I was interested in other things. I just kept getting drawn back to it because people needed someone to do something and I struggled to say no. The time when I became ill, I was coaching professionally with a team in New Zealand called the Chiefs. I was coaching with some very, very good coaches and it was exciting. It was an exciting time. Then I got an opportunity to coach internationally. I got asked to go and help Samoa. This was building into a World Cup. They were playing New Zealand in Samoa. I was going to go over, watch the game and join them for a Pacific tournament. On the way over, I got ill. It was a combination of lots of things. It was a combination of a virus I caught in the airport. I was on prednisone steroids at the time because I had some issues with the way my body was working. That combination, the air flight, I ended up getting sick on the flight. And we got to Samoa, I was pretty crook, went to the hospital. I got given some antibiotics to take orally, but within a couple of hours back to the hotel, I was in a coma. I'd already was early onset sepsis, and sepsis is an insidious thing. Not even doctors see it for what it is sometimes. There was a doctor in Samoa at the time. He came and essentially saved my life. And even then it was a little bit of a gamble, I think. There's a thing called ICU psychosis, where sometimes the drugs they give you to keep you alive was a roll of dice thing, Hopefully they keep you alive, but they could just as likely to kill you. It takes you to all sorts of places. I would have sworn that the experiences I went through, and it seemed like years, but those experiences I went through, I'd have sworn they were real. And I would have sworn I was there doing it, and it was fighting things and fighting situations. And I don't really want to go into it. It was horrific, and I know other people have gone through things like that, but it seemed very real. And then you have a few moments of lucidity, and I remember at one stage, my wife got flown over to Samoa, and I was mindful at one stage of saying goodbye to her. She swore at me. She swore at me and said, that's not going to happen. And I was resuscitated, a few times. I had relatively young children who didn't understand and who got told I wasn't going to be there. They were told that. So tough on them, really tough on them. I was just a lucky, lucky man. You don't know what you've got, do you, until it might not be there anymore. I still suffer a little bit from stuff. It takes all sorts of forms, sepsis, but for me, it knocked me around a fair bit. Lots of people die from it. Lots of people who were left like I was. A vast majority of those people aren't around anymore, but people lose limbs, people lose function. It's a pretty horrible thing. When I went home with very little certainty about what my future would be, and the infectious diseases guy, a beautiful man, he told me that I'd never work again, suffer from chronic fatigue for the rest of my life, suffer from impotence for the rest of my life. And that's someone challenging you. And that's how I felt. Oh, yeah, really? You think? No, you don't know me. And that's how I reacted. I'm not suggesting other people should or shouldn't or could or couldn't. You can only talk about your own experiences. My daughters, they have to sit there with a man who 2 or 3 weeks ago could run around the backyard with you and throw the ball around and do this and do that. And 3 or 4 weeks later, he's struggling to get out of bed to read your story at night. But that's a motivation, isn't it? And after being told I wasn't going to be able to do that, you need to do it. That's how I feel. I need to do that. A couple of weeks after I got home, we ended up getting a dog, and our section wasn't fully fenced, and I dragged my bottom out of bed, went out, dug a post hole, put a post in, because it was really important for me to be able to do something like that, Took me a few weeks to recover, but it was important because I'd been told I couldn't. It was a humbling thing, a really humbling thing, because I still prided myself on my ability to kick a ball. As a 50-year-old, I could still do all those things, hit a golf ball, play tennis, do all those things, and seemingly overnight I lost all that. I went from being one of the best, say, catchers in the professional environment I'm working in as a coach to being the worst catcher in my family, and I had a 5-year-old daughter. Things like that. Things you thought were important in life, things I thought represented me, things I had my self-esteem tied to, just I had to adjust. In terms of enjoying a day, finding joy in simple things, that still existed. My focus sort of shifted a little bit more to music. And still now, when I get a bit tired, it's still a great retreat for me to go and lie and listen.
I am Jamie George. I play my club rugby at Saracens, and I also play for England. Andrew Strawbridge, he is odd, but in the best possible way. He is wacky, but he's like the mad scientist. So he sees things that other people don't see. I honestly think he watches a game in a different universe. But some of the stuff that he comes out with is absolute gold. And he's a great character, and he's been such a good addition to this group.
I'm Ethan Roots, and I play for the Exeter Chiefs and England Rugby. Andrew Strawbridge is a perfectionist on the field, and off the field he's a completely different person. He's relaxed, but he's always talking rugby, so he's just such a nose. Yeah, as all coaches are.
Going back to coaching after being ill was interesting, because being a skills coach and not being able to perform the skills was a challenge. It's still a good day when I don't get hit in the head with the ball because I don't see it. So the measure of success now's just changed a little bit for me, and I might be the worst catch-pass skill coach in the world. I struggle to catch a ball sometimes, and not being able to show, having to learn to describe to show, or having to learn to question, to help understanding. Getting called into the All Blacks as a coach was, again, another interesting process. It was a supportive sort of process, helping out the coaching group a little bit with a few things, particularly around skill acquisition and identifying different ways the team could grow in certain areas. Coaching the All Blacks, I just loved the people. It didn't matter that they were the All Blacks. It's a horrific thing to say if you're a New Zealander, and of course I have pride in my country. But it was about the people. If I'd gone in there and the people weren't open and weren't desirous of change and weren't driven to grow, I wouldn't have stayed there. But that's what I found, a group of receptive coaches, an environment where people wanted to get better. And then I got to go to a World Cup, and I didn't think that would happen because I was on the way to one before and it didn't happen. But to be part of that's pretty exciting. Music in my life, it's become a connection to my family too, particularly to my daughters. So I just got a playlist this morning from one of my daughters who was struggling to sleep. So she just chucked together this playlist and Dean Martin's on it. How wonderful is that? She's discovering the quality of music. There's no bias about how long it's been around or how long something's existed. It's just, this is good and I want to share it with you, Dad. How good is that? How wonderful is that? So that's a connection with her, and I went up to Auckland for a concert with my youngest daughter, sitting next to my daughter at a rock concert and watching her appreciate it, genuinely appreciate it for what it is, not just indulge in her old man. And sharing that moment, yeah, I'm getting goosebumps just thinking about it. Just before COVID, I got a phone call from Steve Borthwick. Steve rang me to go and give him a hand at Leicester Tigers. And then COVID hit, but we kept on talking every now and then, and he'd ring and we'd talk about rugby. After the World Cup, I got home, and a few days later, I got a phone call from Steve just to pick my brains about that and what New Zealand had done, and we started talking, and then he said, can I ring back in a couple of days? Yeah, sure. And then I got a text, can I bring one of my coaches onto the call? Yeah, no problem. And we spoke, and then about 2 days later, can I bring all my coaches on with the conversation? I said, hold it, mate. Because now it's work. Because I'm having to prepare things to talk to your coaches about. Think about what you want. I've got a bit of time on my hands. Think about what you want. The next day he rang back and suggested that I come over and last Six Nations, come over for a couple of weeks and have a look, and just observe and look at the systems and look at the coaching and see if there's any way I could help. You're lucky if in your lifetime you have a moment where you're reasonably popular or more than one person wants you, and that happened then. I'd had a couple of job offers and he'd talked about the possibility of staying or coming back or doing something with them, and I'd said, well, look, yeah, but look, I've just had this, I've just had that, and just had that. I've got to give them answers soon, so he offered me a role. And the role is around just helping the coaching philosophies, problem solving around some of that stuff, help sharpen focus on a few things, help a little bit with the technical parts of the game and some of the skill acquisition and things like that. And that's what I do. I just help out. And I pick up individuals here and there, whether it's talking to coaches about their coaching or talking to players about their game, just little bits here and there. And I'm doing enough to justify my existence, I think. I formed some pretty good relationships with people in the New Zealand system, principally the players. Some of them I'd coached in New Zealand 20s teams years ago, and it sort of felt like finishing a loop. It was about the people. And then you move on and it becomes about another group of people. That's where I am with England. Good group of coaches, driven group of coaches, players who want to get better, and helping that. That's where my buzz comes from, as opposed to wearing a national emblem on my chest, or it's the people. For me, of course, there's a pride in coaching at an international level, but it's not the be-all and end-all for me. It's more about the people, the group, and that group dynamic, and those individuals deserving what we've got to offer. I want to beat New Zealand. I was very disappointed that we got so close. But I want the team I'm with to do well. I want the men I'm with to do well, and I want them to achieve some success and get close to reaching their optimal performance space.
I'm Laura Findlater. I'm Andrew Strawbridge's wife.
I'm Libby Strawbridge. I'm Andrew Strawbridge's daughter.
I'm Teaghin Strawbridge. I'm Andrew's daughter.
In 2003, I met Andrew in a place near Hamilton where we now live, in Gordonton. We were introduced by a mutual friend. He was clever and funny, quite a jokey, joyful person. He was, girls, honestly. I moved quickly because I quite liked him.
He's just always got time for anything we want to do. Even if he's not particularly keen, on whatever it is.
Even if he was like tired, he would just make time.
I didn't like or know anything about rugby, and I've kind of absorbed it over the years. Teaghin follows and plays rugby, and Libby is what would you describe yourself as?
No, I just follow whatever team Dad coaches.
Yeah.
I do play rugby. I've played rugby for a couple of years. He is very motivational, but he doesn't force me to do anything.
Knowing that there's not a whole heap of pressure on you and stuff is almost motivational in itself, because it's just like knowing that you're going to be supported no matter what.
When Andrew's sepsis happened, I heard from him when he got off the plane, and he said, I'm being sent to the hospital because my eye's really swollen, but I'll be fine. And then the Wednesday morning, I got a call from Alama Irimia, who was the Samoan head coach, and he said, Andrew's in intensive care. The All Blacks got me on a plane to Samoa, and at that point Andrew had been resuscitated and put into a coma. He was only ever going to be stabilised in Samoa, so when he flew back on the life flight, it was to get him better. He was only being kept alive, essentially, in Samoa. So it was touch and go a number of times. It was really surreal. Andrew said, I think I need to go. And it was the first complete sentence that he'd spoken. And it was a horrible sentence. And I was very angry at him. So I told him that he should stay. So after sepsis, Andrew, he used to get quite frustrated by what he couldn't do, but now he's much more accepting of it.
He walks into everything. He bumps into people every day.
I think he likes being in public less because he's worried about bumping into people and not being completely aware of his surroundings. He's also not as good at catching tennis balls. Yeah.
He's still pretty good, though.
That's probably been one of his bigger challenges, accepting that things are not as they were, but what they are is still pretty good. He was told by a number of the medical people after his illness that he was a medical miracle. He really wasn't supposed to survive. So to go from coaching the top national competition in New Zealand to coaching internationally, I'm not surprised because I know how amazing he is. I'm just glad that other people can see it now. Part of the reason Andrew is a good coach is because, not to sound dramatic, but he faced death. It made for him the significance of relationships that you have with people even more important than it was before. He thought it was important before, but it's become everything.
Everyone just loves being coached by him so much because he just makes it fun.
He's a dynamic person and he's a kind person, and that's the one thing that has continued. He was a fun dad before, and he continues to be a fun dad, and he's a brilliant husband too.
We're all obviously really proud of him, even though he is a Gumby, and he will always be.
I'm a wanderer and a meanderer, you know. I could still say to you, I'm not sure what I'm going to do. I don't know what I'm going to do with my life yet. It took me so long to accept being a teacher / coach. I only accepted that maybe 15 years ago. I always was sort of half thinking something else might happen, and then woke up one day and realised that that's actually I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing, or what I have, you know, a smidgen of talent to do. I think that's life for a lot of people now. You have moments where you're driven by something and it lasts for a while, and if you're lucky it lasts for a long, long while. I think I've got to a point in this role where I've earned the trust of the men and women I'm working with, whether that's management or coaches and the players. That authentic attitude to what you do is what enables you to do the job effectively. I'm not saying I'm near the sweet spot, but I'm a lot nearer the sweet spot than I have been.